All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to our fourth installment of our Center for Professional Development Week webinar series. I'm excited to welcome you today, and I see some familiar faces, so welcome. A lot of this will be repetitive, but we appreciate you tuning in. And I would like to introduce myself. My name is Kelly Williamson. I am the community manager here at the SUNY Center for Professional Development. You might be familiar with me from the SUNY Workplace Initiative or from any work that we do here at the center. I listed my contact information here if you wanted to follow up with me. I've also added it to the chat, and Michael as well has added his direct contact information if you wanted to reach out to him after our presentation today. A reminder today that you are muted upon arrival, and we will be accepting questions via the chat or the Q&A once we get started. Michael is being a good sport, and he's going to allow us to ask questions throughout the presentation to keep it very conversational and bounce around from topic to topic. So please don't be shy and ask your question right away. And if we have an onslaught of questions, we'll do our best to answer them all in a timely manner. If for some reason we cannot accommodate the questions, I'll take them down and we will follow up with you afterwards. I do have a lot of questions about how are we sharing this presentation? I'll leave it up to Michael if he wants to share his slide deck. However, we will be recording this whole presentation, and actually that recording has already started, and we will be sharing it at our CPD YouTube link, which I will make sure that everyone receives at the end of our week programming. So a little bit about what our Professional Development Week is. It's new for us. This is our inaugural time, and we've partnered with our vendors and friends to present 5 complimentary webinars that focus on one of the 3 areas of growth and development. So personal, professional, and technical. And this idea came out of a strategic planning session and other opportunities, just discussing like how we could increase our awareness while also supporting our SUNY colleagues in the system. And that was a really involved conversation, and one of the things that came out of that was depending on who you are, your role, how you understand professional development, you might not see technical development the same way that you see personal development, and then you might have another definition for actual professional development that you do in your job. So we wanted to make sure that we found at least one topic that could ping off of all of those boxes, and then obviously we have those of you that have been with us on all the webinars, and this is becoming a little repetitive, but we wanted to give back to our colleagues and our partners. If you're not aware of the SUNY Center for Professional Development, we are based in East Syracuse, and we are the central resource for top-notch professional development, training, and support services for our member campuses and the entire SUNY community. So if you're wondering, like, is my campus a member? What does that entail as a member campus? If you've ever heard the word points thrown around when talking about paying or registering for a conference, follow up with me afterwards, and I'll be able to answer any campus-specific questions, especially like who is your contact person on the campus, and how are those points, and how is that outreach being done to your audience. I also wanted to thank you all for using the portal today. This is a new endeavor for us. It's about a year and a half into it. And what's great about this is if this was your first time signing up for something with us, now when you go back to register for a conference or another webinar like this, you'll be automatically authenticated and your information is already stored. So we're trying to make it as convenient for you to participate in our events. If you actually go back to our portal and you see our calendar, this is just a snapshot of some of our programming for November. We want to have this out here as soon as possible so that we know that your campuses make professional development fund plans, or they sponsor programs, or they give money sometimes in cycles. So you might know that you might have some money coming to you in the spring. You can look ahead and see if we have anything in the spring. We also partner with our external vendors. If you're looking for a tech training or a one-off where you want to go and participate in a project management or let's say SharePoint course, in your area, let's say Buffalo, Rochester, Albany, or maybe Manhattan, Long Island, we can help you find that training course and help you pay for it and get the paperwork back to your campus. So we're your single stop destination to support you with your professional development needs. We will be sending a blanket evaluation on Friday, and we'll also be sending a link to our YouTube channel then. If you want to go ahead, you can Google SUNY CPD YouTube, and it should take you to our videos. The first 3 presentations are already up there, and Michael's will be following shortly, probably either today or tomorrow morning. So please take our evaluation. It's a blanket evaluation for the whole session, so you don't have to worry about taking 5 extra ones. And we'll also be giving away 3 CPD prize packs, as well as a complimentary one-on-one coaching session, courtesy of the Sale Institute. There's no need to do anything else. Everyone who's registered is entered in that, and we'll be notifying those users, or attendees next week, who are our lucky winners, to make arrangements. And without further ado, I would like to introduce today's presenter, Michael Sgro. I'm proud to call him my friend, a colleague, and now a full-fledged partner. I'm going to abbreviate his biography a little bit, but you can find the full text on the webinar microsite. So who is Michael Sgro? He has a great title for today's presentation, of course. Michael is a business owner, a certified coach, an advocate, a college success expert, an empathic leader. He coaches professionals around the country to improve their overall effectiveness, leadership skills, career readiness, digital savvy, and so much more. Michael's vision for himself is to help people achieve their potential through networking, technology, and community building. So Michael is a Syracuse native. He ascended the ranks in higher education at several institutions in New York, earning a stellar reputation for his work with constituent programming, relationship building, professional networking, and digital media. He has spent 20 years on college campuses in New York City and Central New York before coming home to Syracuse to start his own coaching business. So you might see that Michael's name is very familiar to you. Michael has earned several honors throughout the years, including the NYU Advocate for Change Award, the SUNY Quad Award for Best Alumni Program, and the prestigious Lemoyne College Ignatian Award for Service. He holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from Lemoyne College, a certificate in business coaching from the Professional Business Coaches Alliance of North America, a certificate in project management from the American Management Association, is a sponsor of Believe in Syracuse, and a member of Center State CEO. Michael lives, works, and participates actively in the historic downtown Syracuse community with his Maltipoo, Jonah. So we're really excited to have Michael here. He's not that far from us geographically, but I'm glad to bring him in so he could talk to all of you across the state and across the campus. If you just joined us, just know a couple things. You're muted, accepting all questions through either the Q&A portal or our chat feature. We are having our professional development session starting right now. Michael, if you want to start sharing your screen, I'm all set. And our coach and our host today is Michael Sgro, owner and leadership coach of Michael Sgro Leadership Coaching. Again, webinar will be recorded, and all questions and comments should be placed in the chat. And take it away, Coach.
Thank you, Kelly. Wow, this is just amazing. I love technology and love being able to access so many people so easily across the internet. For those of you I've not met before, my name is Mike Sgro, like Kelly said, and I'm all about education. And this program is sort of twofold. It's a model for student and alumni engagement and development, and it's also a professional enrichment opportunity for you. So I want you to look at it in both lenses, and perhaps there's content today that you would glean from the presentation that could be helpful to develop your students and your young alumni or alumni in general, or engage them. Or this is opportunities for your own professional enrichment, opportunities for your teams, colleagues, and institutions. And like Kelly said, please do ask questions. I'm at a disadvantage. I call myself an empathic speaker, and so I love being around people when speaking and seeing their faces and how they respond and react to the information. And so I'm at a disadvantage not seeing you. So I would appreciate any and all questions, interruptions, comments, thoughts, ideas. I'd like this to be as interactive as possible and hopefully very meaningful for you.
Great.
Let's get started.
Oh, Michael, Kelly, it's Kelly. I just wanted to see your screen isn't shared yet, so just wanted to, FYI, wasn't sure.
We've practiced this several times, and here I go.
I know. Here you go. All right, there we go.
All right, here we are. So let's get started. So what is professional adulting? I came up with this term. It's actually on my window of my business storefront. And just as a quick note on its history, some of you may know sort of the definition around adulting. A lot of our students and young professionals have coined that term. And adulting is usually talking about competencies in managing financials, how to get a first apartment, changing a car tire. And there is a young professional, her name is Maya, and she is a business owner out of Atlanta, Georgia. She started a company called Professional Adulting. And I had saw this some time ago and contacted her to ask her, tell me how you're using this term and what is it you do in your business? And she explains, as a millennial herself, that she works with HR offices across the country to bridge communication gaps between younger generations and older generations of people, particularly between baby boomers and millennials. And I thought this was very fascinating. A lot of the research I have done before I started my business was working with HR offices and getting a sense of what sort of things do people struggle with at work. And it seems that the number one item was effective communication. So a lot of the ways I've been coining sort of professional adulting has been under the understanding that we're looking to build more effective communication. So I'll sort of break down professional adulting in the context of the presentation today in a few slides. But the goal today is for you to not just get what professional adulting is and how I'm using it, but how it could be applied to your work with your students and graduates, but also your teammates and colleagues. So for a quick definition, I'm looking at professional adulting as competencies to be successful as a leader in your organization or business. It's the abilities to thrive in the role that you have, and it's a model to build effective communication. And I'll keep coming back to this concept of effective communication throughout the session. I want you to just get your mindset around this quote. Oftentimes when I'm coaching someone or working with an organization on a dilemma, team issue, we talk about things in terms of what other people should be doing, could be doing more effectively. Oftentimes it's us in terms of how we're relating or managing the issue at hand. So I love this quote because it really looks at ourselves as the key to solving anything that we're wrestling with at work. So everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing themselves. So I want you to get you in the sort of the mindset for this presentation and thinking about what you can do, how you react, how you respond to the issues, the challenges, and the opportunities that exist in your organization. So to drill down in terms of what professional adulting is, I'm going to look at this definition. It's fostering empowerment by building relationships diplomatically through effective communication. There's a few key components: self-awareness, knowing yourself in it, and I'll get into that later. Empowerment or influence, which the basic definition of empowerment is information sharing. Relationships and teamwork. I'm not sure if everyone knows what the platinum rule is. I know many folks are familiar with the golden rule. The golden rule is treat others how you want to be treated. The platinum rule is treating others how they want to be treated. So a little bit of a difference there, and I want you to consider that when building relationships or doing good teamwork. Diplomacy, which is discretion with self-awareness, and communication, deploying empathic understanding. And I'll get into these concepts as we go forward. Any questions about professional adulting and sort of the concept and where the session is going?
I haven't heard any yet. I think they're mesmerized by your voice.
Right. Me too. So let's talk a little bit about empowerment. Empowerment is based on the idea that we give employees the skills, the resources, the authority, opportunity, the motivation, and holding them responsible and accountable for the outcomes of their actions to contribute to their competency and satisfaction of their work. The key to empowerment, I shared in the last slide, is sharing information. Oftentimes, folks if they don't know the goal or the vision for the organization or the work at hand, we get very frustrated. And so the key to empowerment is absolutely sharing information. What are some of the typical barriers on why we don't empower others around us? Anyone have a thought as to what some of those barriers are as it comes to empowerment based on this definition? I've got some examples. Oftentimes, when a new person starts in an organization, folks don't know them very well, and there immediately is a divide in terms of understanding, in terms of what that person's history might be or what expectations they might have. They represent change, and oftentimes we're fearful of change. Mm-hmm. So a strategy I have for particularly new managers or new leaders in an organization, or you've just recently been promoted in managing others, is to empower the folks that you're working with. So sharing information, sharing your vision for what the work is and where you want to go with it. Empowerment is so key to getting folks on the same page, as well as having them deliver on their responsibilities in the role that they have.
Michael, we did get some answers.
Okay, great.
So we have insecurity, a little bit probably on both sides. Then we had the discussions that come after that are not productive or take too long, depending on what your culture is like. And then some folks that disagree on what the barrier and issues are and not being able to find that common ground.
That's great. One of the things that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on in this presentation, but the comments sort of allude to is empowerment and feedback are one and the same. So when someone receives some feedback from their supervisor, a colleague, a teammate, there is a perception if you don't receive feedback all that often, or you don't provide feedback all that often, it can sometimes feel a certain way. It can feel like an attack or feel like disrespect. So when we think about empowerment and we're sharing information, I also want you to consider feedback as part of that loop. One of the things that we'll talk about later is how to establish a feedback loop with your colleagues, with teammates, with employees, as a way to empower them for the future. Oftentimes, folks get shut down by feedback because of the how we shared the information, not necessarily the what. And again, from an empowerment standpoint, we want to focus on the how so that people can receive it. So thank you for those comments. One of the things I find to be very true, Mike, in the coaching business is that folks will want to change if they've got motivation. Motivation is a huge factor as it relates to inspiring any sort of change. So what I'm thrilled by is the fact that so many of you have jumped on this call today and or are watching this video now because you're perhaps looking for some change. So I imagine at least many of you are at least at the point of, I want to do it, and sort of envisioning what next steps professional adulting can provide for you and your organization and how you're interrelating with others. So let's talk a little bit about relationships. My experience, having worked in higher ed for 20 years, is that the formula for success in every role that I had was building relationships, having strong foundational relationships with my supervisors, with the deans, the presidents, the colleagues, the teammates. And so some of the skills and thoughts I have as it relates to building relationships, it all relies on this first bullet point here. It's harder for anyone to act poorly or not in your favor if they don't have a strong relationship in place. So if you're in a tricky situation at work where you don't communicate with someone all that often, or you don't have a relationship with them, and something happens and you need their help and support, and you make that emergency phone call to that person, and you realize you don't have a relationship, and that conversation doesn't go as strongly or successfully as you want. So one of the things I found to be true in building relationships is establishing them amongst everyone in the organization. Have a working relationship with everyone that you are in the organization with. This will help for future issues that could arise. But it's harder for anyone to say no to us if we have a relationship with them. And so I want you to consider that as a first step in terms of the folks that you work with. Don't work in isolation. Oftentimes in higher education, we're very siloed and sort of work within our own groups and our own silos. I'm asking you to consider and think about how you might step beyond that and work across the aisle, work across silos to establish relationships, because you never know when they're going to be a benefit to you down the road. One of the things I also share with clients that I have about establishing relationships is looking at what I call lateral relationships. Who are the people who are of similar title of you in your organization or colleagues that maybe you don't work with on an everyday basis, but it's good to have a good working relationship with them. So I want you to think about creating lateral support for yourself in your organization by reaching out to folks just to say hello, right? Not just when you need something, but establishing a set of goodwill efforts to make the opportunities down the road a lot more accessible to you by having an established relationship. So think about lateral relationships and those folks who have similar level of responsibility in the organization, similar titles, as a way to do that. Some of the greatest tips come from Dale Carnegie. He has a list called How to Win Friends and Influence People. These are key factors in building relationships. And so I'm just going to read these quickly to you. Become genuinely interested in other people. Smile. I'm smiling as I'm doing this presentation. Remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. It's so important, especially in email communications. A lot of folks get in the habit of sending quick notes out to folks without using their name. It's so important that you use folks' names. It really draws attention to the fact that you, again, are building a relationship with that person, honoring them by using their name. Being a good listener, talking in terms of the other person's interests, and make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. As I read that list, anyone want to share an example or have a question about how they've seen that play out in their workplace?
Michael, I have an example of something I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you're interested.
Yeah,
I like to use the word appreciate a lot in my email, especially when I'm communicating to someone as a thank you. Like, I really appreciate, or I appreciate you, or I appreciate what you're doing. So I thought I'd jump in and break the ice.
Yeah, I like that a lot because it's very qualitative in terms of how someone might perceive the message, right? Instead of just yes, no, and sort of these quick answer emails, you're adding some really high level quality to the message, which again, I think people respond to, and it helps strengthen the relationship. Any other comments or thoughts about that?
I see that we have handwritten thank you notes, and notice that people have actually kept them and display them as a point of pride. Another of our attendees asked, they make a point of asking about children or animals, something to, make them more human. Please and thank you, patience and kindness, and also, again, with the notes. So, and then I think that's it for right now. Oh, asking about the personal life and using we instead of I when sending messages from the office. Something else that's come in.
Awesome. That's all very inclusive and very good relationship building tactics. I think these are also good to share with your teammates, right? When we are doing these sort of activities, we also role model those behaviors. If you've got staff, I want you to think about how you're sharing what you do to build relationships with them. Not everyone enters the workplace with these skills in place, and you as a leader, it would be important not only to just role model these behaviors, but also share them as techniques for developing strong relationships and interpersonal skills at work. I have found that to be a benefit to folks that I've worked with in the past when I share with them some ideas about how to build strong relationships at work. Not everyone is oriented and hardwired the same way. You know, I consider myself a very high influencer, gregarious, outgoing, ENFJ. I'm very extroverted. And so for me, I covet building relationships because it's how I get my energy. Not everyone's hardwired the same way I am, and I understand that. So for those of us who are a little bit more introverted, who don't require other people's energy, introverts are hardwired with their own internal batteries, so they can stay charged on their own, whereas I steal energy from others. So relationship building is a critical piece for me. They are more self-reliant on how they get energy. But they're also seeking information as to how to build strong relationships for folks to make the workplace a lot more enjoyable. So just kind of quickly looking at how we build relationships, the next level after you've established relationships is building trust. And so I thought I'd share just 5 ideas as to how we establish trust, and they're all sort of interrelated. Active collaboration is key. You know, again, I talked earlier about silos, and I know that all of you have been borne witness to working in a silo or having been affected by that. So active collaboration is a great way to break down silos and break down the walls between departments, or even within the department by just sheer active collaboration. Active collaboration does not have to just include project management. Right? We can do active collaboration on professional development opportunities or outside the work opportunities where we're developing a sense of teamwork and offering the folks that we're working with an opportunity just to go out to lunch, right? Those are all ways that you can actively collaborate, increase communication and relationships amongst the group, not only through project management, but also in terms of outside the work opportunities. When I say mutual satisfaction, what I'm really looking at there is that folks feel that the relationship building that's going on in the workplace or that you're working on with them is mutually beneficial and satisfying, right? Oftentimes, you know, when I talked about the golden rule earlier, the golden rule is treating others how you want to be treated. It's so important to find out how others want to be treated. So that's, you know, that'll be a way that you can ensure mutual satisfaction in terms of building relationships, in terms of working with other folks, keeping open communication. And this one is tricky. I've noticed a lot in working with several organizations that there are folks who believe that they're communicating openly, but it's not being received well. Oftentimes when folks look at open communication, they think of email. And they think of, I've sent the person some information, I sent them the information, whether or not they read it is up to them. I want you to consider that open communication means open dialogue, where you're actually engaging with people one-on-one or within a group setting to share information that's meaningful with them. We can't become reliant on email. Email is not going to replace good relationship building. So I want you to consider when we talk about open communication that it means some real-time interpersonal relationship building as a way to create an environment where there is open communication. Effective liaison. If you're working with a number of leaders in an organization and you have team mates or employees that work with you, it's so important that you communicate and empower your staff by sharing information with the folks that you're working with. This sort of looks like, you know, you attend a council meeting and you're sharing information in this meeting, and you don't bring that information back to your teammates or employees. Again, we're talking about building team trust and empowering people. Sometimes when leaders sit on information that they're not sharing, that they can share, folks can start building some resentment. And so maintaining a relationship with your team by being an effective liaison is a great way to build trust.
Hey, Michael, I had a question. Corey was asking, one of our attendees, how do you, can you give some suggestions to build relationships between coworkers who might both be like what we would consider alpha, or maybe both like too similar and have aggressive or larger than life styles in the same office?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to have a slide about sort of setting some expectations, but just as a quick answer to that, once we start recognizing the styles of others in our work group or others in the organization, if we can set clear expectations with each other, I do this with a lot of folks who have the same sort of personality as me. I tend to fill the room and speak and share a lot of information. And when I encounter others who have sort of similar orientation, I start to negotiate with that person, right? We don't want to take all the airtime and consume the room with information or monopolizing the time, right? So once we start seeing those things in our relationships with others, it's just a good idea to sort of talk out expectations and share how you're going to work best with each other. There might be, Kelly, you and I have worked together in the past where we've actually run some activities together. As those activities started, we were very good about establishing what's the expectation. How will the day go? What if some of your alumni show up and what if some of my alumni show up? Who's going to do what, right? By
Yes,
sharing
we're
expectations.
both larger than life.
Yeah, right. And so it's really easy to get caught up in that. And as long as we're sort of building a relationship with each other by effectively communicating, sharing our expectations, we can work through that. We should resolve anything that could come up as a result of our orientation, our style, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I find that just open communication and really setting expectations is a great way to resolve that.
Yeah, I have another question if you're interested.
Yes,
So it's more of a comment and a question, and I'm going to make it a little bit of both. So we have a participant who mentions that, as an introvert, it's very easy and comfortable to rely on email more than anything else. Plus, we have this device-driven society, although I'll point out, like, if you're in SUNY, check out Workplace, shameless plug. But can you maybe give some suggestions or talk about, like, what should that best practice be for an introvert who wants to have a deeper relationship with some of their colleagues, but it may not be like either a confidence, or it might also just be that it might be perceived differently. And also maybe like with that, another question just came in, like how can you make it genuine instead of like the fakeness that there's a, perception or, intuition that's not genuine.
That's a great question. I'm working with two clients right now. Actually, it's a perfect example. They're very introverted, very connected to people. They're real relationships between people that they know already. They're not great at meeting new people. And so one of the clients recently shared with me that he was getting frustrated because he wasn't being picked for project teams. And one of the things that we looked at was when there was team meetings, he would not say anything at all. And so his supervisor and some of the project leaders didn't pick him because he seemed disinterested. He's nothing but kind, very thoughtful, and very smart. He should be picked for teams, but he wasn't showing up in the work. There was no activity to point out the fact that he was interested in actually joining a project team. And so while he was frustrated by the fact that no one was pulling him into these groups, his inactivity was pushing him further away from getting to his goals. So in an example like that, I shared with him, if you don't have anything to contribute in a meeting because of the way that you're oriented and maybe you're a little bit more introverted, perhaps ask a question. The act of participation is going to be essential just to show up in the work, to show up on the radar so that folks participate with you and then you don't seem aloof or disinterested, right? No one knows he's a really kind person if he doesn't communicate, right? So he's just got to participate. And so my first part of this, the answer to the questions are just participation. Find small ways to participate. And the safest way to participate in any sort of work situation is to just simply ask a question, right? By asking a question, you're participating, you're doing something to show up in the work, establishing a relationship, even through questions, is a good positive step forward. Can you remind me the second part of that question, Kelly?
Yes, sure. It was, I'm getting some feedback here. Basically, it was about, can you hear that feedback? Or is it just me? Are you there?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, good. It's gone now. Whew. Basically, it was about fakeness, and if it really is you trying to fake that genuine interest versus like how it might be perceived, and then also with that, someone also mentioned forced.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
So one of the tricky parts of this is, if you've been someplace a while and have a relationship with someone or a few someones that's gotten sour or is a little prickly or is just not where you want it to be, my recommendation is to do two things. One is when someone starts new in an organization, we have all the opportunity to create the relationship that we want with that person. And so it's always a good idea if someone starts new that we are one of the first people that take them to coffee, get to know them, talk about future partnerships, and establish sort of the relationship. What gets stickier is after a period of time working with someone and things have gotten a little prickly, it's very hard to perhaps interact with that person and be genuine or really intent on building a solid relationship. So what I offer people is to consider having a reset conversation. And a reset conversation is an opportunity to chat with someone outside of an issue, right? So the time to have a reset conversation is not when something is really hot or when something bad has just happened. That's probably not the time to have a reset conversation. So if you've got a relationship with someone who's a little prickly or it's just not where you want it to be, outside of a issue that's hot, find some time to have a reset conversation and just lean into it. Say to this person, hey, I'm finding that our relationship isn't as strong as I hoped, or that perhaps that you want as well. If I've had any part in making this relationship sour or creating the prickliness, I apologize. Or, I'm sorry about doing X, Y, and Z. Finding a way to hit reset with that person is going to establish a better working relationship, and it's going to build trust like we're talking about in this slide here. And so it takes some courage to have those kind of conversations. But in all my years, 20 some years working, the times I've had conversations like that where I've hit reset, folks have been able to receive it. We typically have that conversation off-site or not in someone's office, right? To delineate power or structure is to go to sort of some safe location, coffee shop, the caf, a dining hall, and have a reset conversation. Make it a point to do this if you've got folks who you're working with and things are not going the way that you want. You'll be surprised by the act of just doing this is what is well received by the other person. Any questions about that? I want to make sure I'm answering the question well. It is certainly something that takes a little bit of courage, but you've got to be in a good headspace to do it. And it shouldn't be during a time when things are really, really hot, because you're going to bring that energy to the situation and may do a disservice or the opposite for the effect that you wanted. I'm going to keep going here. And again, if there's questions, please share along the way. And this sort of speaks to that in terms of a reset conversation. One of the thoughts I have about how to be someone who's looking at professional adulting as a concept and some elements that help improve relations with others is to look at diplomacy and see diplomacy as a guide. And so I think of diplomacy as the art of people management in an effective way and an effective and sensitive way. So when we think about a diplomat and how they react under pressure, they can see everything coming at them well in advance. These are very future-forward folks who are sort of predicting the future and looking at the relationships and the outcomes of projects and sort of thinking about the relationship. The way I really describe this in a lot of the coaching I do is think about two sets of task lists. Oftentimes when we set goals or for projects is we look at the tasks, and it's all the tactical things that we need to do: get the email out, have this meeting, do this, do that. I want you to think about, as a diplomat, there's people tasks. So every project that we work on, we need to build consensus. We need to have buy-in. We need to have support. Those activities take spending time with people. And so think about, when you're creating your larger task list of the goals and the projects that you have, that there are some tasks that you need to put in there that are more people oriented. I found this to be true when I made decisions about certain projects. And in order to push forward on the project, I knew the tactical things I needed to do, but I needed to make sure that my boss was on the same page. So I'd want to meet with her and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing. Do I have your support? What are your thoughts about this project? Right? And so there was a very diplomatic effort underway to not just complete the project and do the tasks, but really lean in on the people side of this to make sure that I was doing what it took to make the project as successful as possible, but certainly in the eyes of my supervisor, perhaps colleagues who would have to participate, and really lean into it from a people-oriented position. And so using diplomacy is a great way to do that. No, we don't win at politics. We can only maneuver through politics. I had a great assistant dean I worked with at Fordham University who shared this with me. It was my first job as a residence hall director. And she shared that, you just don't win at politics, but you have to learn to navigate in it. Often, times we say things like, there's no chance, I just don't do the politics, right? Well, no one's saying that you should do the politics, but you have to figure out how to maneuver through it, right? And oftentimes the diplomat is someone who maneuvers successfully through politics. So I want you to think about like the State Department and what the employees of a State Department would do, right? As acting as a diplomat, they quell and dissipate tension. They don't create it, right? So think about the energy that you're providing in any one conversation or any one project. That is going to be your cue as to how to perform. And my suggestion is to look at diplomacy as a cure. Any questions, Kelly, there?
I have a question. I asked for a little clarification, but I'll ask the first part of it. So going back a little bit, I think this helps tee off this question. But when you have those reset conversations, you have like that courage aside, right? Like you need that courage. But what would be some ways that you could actually say to your supervisor and coworker, or basically say to them, like, I want to have a reset conversation with you? Like, how does one package that? Like, or explain what you want to meet about, because, and I think like I asked for, okay, so Corey said, yeah, explaining about what you want to meet about. And, personally from my past, career, I would say like, if I had that conversation, someone would say like, well, we don't have time. Can we just talk right now? So if you could maybe walk through a scenario with that.
Yep. Great question. Now, so it's been my experience that I've done this so many times that it comes naturally to me now. So that my hope would be that this would come naturally to anybody moving forward. But you have to experiment with it and be willing to do it and be in the right headspace. So the first key factor would be not this be a reaction to a hot or tense situation, right? It has to be outside of that, because it's going to be met with some coded language that you want to talk to me because this thing happened, right? Find a time when there's nothing that's going to be perceived as getting in the way of creating this sort of safe space for dialogue, okay? So that's the first piece of it, and that's an important factor, because folks will sense that you want to talk because of the bad thing that just happened. It may be not the best time to hit reset. You might only need to be able to manage and maneuver through what the situation might be at hand and not be able to build that bridge again, right? So bridge building has to come at a time that is mutually beneficial to both of you, all right? So that's a piece of it. Second, the way I've sort of approached it, and so in a very practical, sort of thoughtful way, is to stop by somebody's office, stand in their doorway and say, hey, we should grab coffee sometime. I want to make sure that things are going well. If there's things that you think I should consider in the work that we're doing that's coming up, give them the opportunity to be able to share information with you, right? Don't have it be perceived that it's an opportunity for you to tell them what they should be doing, right? So if you're leaning into it, that this is a benefit to them and an opportunity for them to engage with you, then that's the second best next step. The third would be in setting up a conversation. If things are really not going really well with this person, I would try to find a more of a social setting where you're engaging that person, so that it doesn't seem like you're pulling them out of their work to have a conversation. And so maybe it's at the holiday party that you see them and you strike up a conversation and sort of get a temperature read as to where things are, right? In hopes that maybe that would be a good point to then conclude the conversation with, hey, next week, the students are away. Why don't we go grab a cup of coffee, right? So this is more indirect in terms of approaching it. But if things are really hot between the person and you still want to do it, I'd find a way to use a social setting or a networking opportunity or a place where you're going to see them as a way to sort of lean into them to get a temperature read and then start that process. Here's the thing. Not everyone is going to want to have a reset conversation. I've encountered only one person in my 20-some years who I experienced that with, and I had to let it be. I did attempt many a time, and this person didn't want to sort of hit reset. And so I did what I could to remain in a space of kindness and treat that person with respect and sort of maneuver through, sometimes the prickliness that they offered with a smile. I just sort of stomached my way through it. And I didn't create any more drama or add any more to it. But I do find that most people, when you approach them to want to get to know them, hit reset, or kind of build a better future together, that they're willing to do it. It's sometimes uncomfortable for us because it's not been our habit, and that might be what you're feeling as the reason why you don't want to do it, or maybe it feels just a little unusual. But I guarantee when in doing this in practice, you will get, it'll become a habit, and it will go a lot easier.
Yeah, Michael, I can expand on that. There was another comment about, and this is, I laugh because, history with people, especially if you work with them for a long time, that there could be a perception that you have wronged them, which is sometimes like, maybe something happened, or maybe it's something where they're not feeling that you value them. That's all that perception. But it was more of a comment, but I thought I'd make it into a question about, like you were saying, that stomach, and move on. Can you give maybe some reflections on if someone does not want to come to your table, to have that reflective conversation, and maybe they truly are a bad actor, or they're feeling like, they're just not in that space with you. How can you make peace with that and not let it affect your overall mentality?
I know this is going to sound harsh, but you just do, right? You have to make a decision, right? And so in making a decision, we perform, right? And so those of us who are strong feelers, and I'm a strong feeler, what I realized was there are times where someone would shut down progress on a project or the work or the goal that I'm trying to accomplish. And at some point, you just have to make a decision that you're going to have to move forward. And so you're going to have that decision actually play out where you're not just getting caught up in your feelings, but you're moving forward, right? It's activity that's going to get you past the situation or working with the person who doesn't really want to work with you, right? If they're not showing up in the work, all you can do is show up. And what I'd say is, I don't want to sound like a hopeless romantic here, but, continue to give them the opportunity to show up, right? That's why I think the act of having a reset conversation helps you accomplish that. By giving them a chance to participate with you in a safe and comfortable way. And again, I haven't seen all but one situation where it didn't work out. So at some point you have to make the decision to let it go and proceed. I've actually worked with someone who said, you know what, I don't know that our personalities gel, but my associate director and you really seem to hit it off. Why don't you work directly with them and as a way to work with our department, and no harm, no foul, and that'll just be a benefit to both of us. And I was okay with that, right? So sometimes it's finding and setting the expectations for each other in the best possible way that we can work with each other. But we have to ultimately make a decision that we're not going to let our relationship with someone shut down our progress, our work, our forward momentum, and the work that we have.
Good, good.
So just looking at diplomacy, folks still might struggle with, well, I'm not sure what diplomacy really is. Look at it from a point of discretion, right? So it's the quality of behaving or speaking in such a way as to avoid causing offense or revealing private information. It takes practice in using minimal and inclusive language. It's often done in person and not over email or social media. And dealing with important and sensitive matters requires to be off the radar. So I want you to think about discretion as a skill set, as a tool in your toolkit for resolution of conflict, for dealing with politics, for hitting reset in conversations with folks that might be a little bit more prickly. But discretion is a key factor in how you could perform as a leader, as an effective manager, and as an effective communicator. One of the things I was thinking about as I was reading this is the last bullet here, which is sort of staying off the radar. There were times, in the work that I've done in higher education, I knew stuff about private information about people because of the nature of the roles I had. But I never shared information inappropriately with folks on my team or others in other areas, because I didn't want to damage the relationships that they had with those people. And so while I might have been hurt, burned, or affected by something with someone, me passing on that information about people or my own hurt will only activate other people's hurt. And it's that kind of alliance building that could be very dangerous in an organization. And so in thinking about how you can be discreet and sort of manage your frustration or information that you have about other people or the work is important. And I find that being more discreet allows for more productivity at the end of the day. It's certainly to be true that we should have folks that we can talk to, like our supervisor or trusted colleagues, to kind of bounce ideas off of stuff. But I find that commiseration is less effective than being discreet and an effective communicator.
Michael, I had a question or like a comment. I see the benefit of having conversations in person, but if you don't feel that the people have your back at work, should you keep things on the radar to protect yourself? So I think that's more of a question about, like, if you feel that there's a toxic environment, and this person might chime in and say, like, I interpreted this wrong, and that's fine. Her name's also Kelly. What should there be documentation and things that you're putting in place so that you feel comfortable in your position and comfortable that you're, I don't say protected, it's not the right word, but how can you balance those by staying off the radar in terms of, keeping it in when it's not appropriate, but when should you share it out?
Yeah, I think the first question you ask yourself is someone in danger? Is there a legal issue? Are there factors here that put a student in jeopardy, right? When it comes to those sort of matters, then documentation and information sharing with authorities or the appropriate parties is always the case. But if we're not talking about those sort of factors, right? We're talking about not getting along with somebody at work or someone just not that nice, right? There's putting people on notice in terms of using email, and we all know what that looks like, right? And then there's effective communication. I have found that when we want to not put somebody on notice or on blast and those sort of things through email, that my solution is talking to the person in real time when it's convenient for them, right? Oftentimes I might have been very upset or disappointed with an email I got from somebody, and I was ready to write back some nasty note and just be sort of in my position and in my authority to kind of tell them what's sort of up. And I can't tell you that I did not write those emails and not have them in my draft folder. But oftentimes, in fact, almost all the times, I never sent them. Drafting some of those messages was healthy for me just to get some frustration out. But I didn't send them because I knew that I was just making the situation worse. And so unless it's something legal or an issue where a student is at risk or there's some liability, documentation is less important. What's more important is leaning into the relationship. And so if I've gotten some email from someone that was unsavory or not, what I wanted, I just didn't participate in sort of email chain frustration where then everyone's copying their boss and, it just goes on. I know we're all sort of familiar with that looks like. I just pick up the phone or maybe stop by and see somebody and ask them, is this a good time to chat? I want to process the note that I just received and maybe give you some insights as to what I'm thinking about because I really want to understand your perspective and want to resolve the matter at hand. Again, if we lean into it with an orientation of diplomacy, compassion, I find that you have higher success rate. And so I'd say negotiate between what needs to be documented because it's serious, a liability, legal, something that affects the life of a student versus sort of an interrelationship issue.
Okay, great. So we've got about 5 minutes left. So I wasn't sure how you wanted to spend those.
Yeah, so I get a little chatty, so I appreciate everyone's patience.
We've had a lot of requests for slides and obviously the presentation in video as well. So just as a reminder to folks.
Yeah, so just in thinking about some of the stuff I was already talking about, responding versus reacting, I think a lot of us have been in conversations about what this looks like in terms of responding versus reacting. Instead of thinking about responding versus reacting, I want you to think of two new categories. I want you to think of unproductive and productive, right? So productive are more of the responding ways of working. Reacting would be more unproductive. So I'll just leave that slide up for another second here, and you can come back to this as to the kind of concepts that go along with what's more productive versus unproductive. As a diplomat, we sort of agree to actively seeking information. There's a great book by Miguel Ruiz called The Four Agreements, and one of his premises is don't make any assumptions, right? So seeking out information is always key. When we make assumptions, we're going to turn this situation left. So finding out information, make sure that you're accurate or know as much information about something that you're solving with your projects at hand or just interpersonal relationships. Constantly create an environment, a comfortable space for discussion, engage in ideas in a calm manner, revisit topics in the future, negotiate and seek resolution, right? If you're having a reset conversation, don't go into it with the idea, I'm going to leave being right? Go in with an idea that you're going to negotiate and seek resolution that's mutually beneficial to both of you, right? And welcome ongoing feedback. Here's just a quick cartoon on communication gone awry, right? Your negotiating skills need fine-tuning. And we got this character sort of screaming out loud, what? Self-awareness, okay? It's the capacity for introspection and the ability to recognize oneself as an individual separate from the environment and other individuals. Self-awareness is key in your negotiation skills, in being a diplomat, and really being an effective communicator. Acknowledging where you are, right? Again, like I said earlier, this idea of like when something's really hot, that's not the time to talk about it or work through it. It's to resolve it, but maybe not process and hit reset, right? You're going to have to be very self-aware to know where you are in relationship with someone so that you're not contributing factors that make the situation worse. This is all caught up in ideas around emotional intelligence. There's a great book out there. If you want a self-guided tour in emotional intelligence, there's a great book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. They don't pay me. I'm just offering it as an idea. But they've got a great assessment that you could take for your emotional intelligence and in this book. And what's neat about it is that you get the assessment back, you get scored in 4 areas, including self-awareness, and it tells you exactly what are the skill sets and competencies to improve to increase your emotional intelligence score, which is really terrific. And then 6 months, you could take the appraisal over again and see how well you've been doing. And it tells you exactly where in the book to read to help improve your score. But emotional intelligence is largely a big bucket of opportunity in terms of competencies, self-awareness, social awareness, ways that we can increase our effectiveness in building relationships with others. When I think about what I do each day, it's really around competency development. So let's think about professional adulting as competency development. And here's just a quick idea about how you can take some incompetent behavior for yourself that might be unconscious. You becoming aware, self-aware of the things that you might be doing that are creating impact with those around you is conscious incompetence. You practicing competent behaviors is the learning and the habit forming to get to a mastery level. And it's just as a quick example, one of the ways I've seen myself grow in this one aspect is through difficult dialogue. I used to be very triggered when difficult dialogue was happening between me and a boss, a subordinate. Now, I don't act difficult in dialogue that might be tough or very emotional or very triggering. I stay in a space because I'm very self-aware to not contribute anything else to difficult situation that already exists. And so for me, I've taken that competency and I've built to scale some mastery around how to effectively communicate during difficult dialogue. And I'd ask you to think about what competencies that you are thinking about developing and make them very conscious choices in terms of developing that competency to get to an unconscious competency in that same skill. So
Great.
very quickly, just want to share as we have conversations with new employees or others that we want to hit reset with, it's important to cover expectations. And these are things, interrelationship skills and things that people prefer as folks that you have relationships with. Goals are the easier things. It's the things that we work on. It's the projects, it's the work itself. And feedback loops. This is the roadmap to share and get the things back on track. So in a reset conversation, you might share with the person how you best receive feedback, right? Give them the key as to how to communicate with you effectively, and in hopes that they're going to share how they receive feedback. As an empathic leader, I want you to consider 3 strategies: cognitive, emotional, compassion. And anytime we communicate with someone, if you use cognitive style, I see you, I understand what you're going through. Emotional, I feel you, right? Because it's happened to me. Compassion, I help you. I'm going to do something to make a difference here, right? You can use these 3 styles as a leader to effectively communicate. And there's some great tutorials on this one concept on YouTube by a man named Daniel Goldman, and he explains how to use these 3 empathic leadership skills. Again, for just the presentation, these are some active skills for you to take away, to use and implement immediately to help develop your professional adulting opportunities. And just some information about myself, if you would like to talk further. I did share a lot very quickly, and so I hope it wasn't overwhelming or confusing, but I'm absolutely available for follow-ups, conversations. Add me on LinkedIn, send me a text, communicate through email. I'm happy to share and connect. Higher education has been the love affair of my life, and working with folks in higher ed in the capacity that I do now is a real treat. So I'd be happy to talk through anything I talked about today or other topics with anybody today.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. So just to know, if there were some people that indicated they wanted to you to reach out to them afterwards and just have a conversation. So those people, I have saved your information. We put Michael's contact information in the chat, as well as my own if you want to get in touch with me. If you want the PowerPoint presentation, also send me an email, kelly.williamson@suny.edu, and we'll accommodate you, as well as this recording, which will be up on our YouTube, if not today, tomorrow morning. And you can find that SUNY CPD videos. Michael, one thing before we wrap, there was a question about the emotional intelligence test. Do you have any info about, well, just quickly, like where they could find or what they should search online to get more information on that? You sold it so brilliantly.
Yes, so there's a book. It's a book. It's
Okay, it's
called
a book.
Emotional Intelligence 2.0. It's by Travis Bradberry and Gene Greaves. And
Okay.
when you get the book, you also get the assessment. So you pay for both.
Okay.
And the assessment is online, so they'll give you a code that you use that's specific to you when you buy that book, and then you read the sections that apply to your appraisal, which is a very convenient way to read a book, in my opinion.
Okay, yeah, that works out well. And so it's Emotional Intelligence 2.0, Travis Bradberry, Gene Greaves.
And
So
it's a great team building activity as well. I've done this with my teams in the past. And it's a really neat way to kind of look at the work, especially if you're in a forward-facing unit in the university. If you do public relations, alumni relations, student engagement of any sort, you're on all the time and you're communicating with a lot of people. Sort of knowing where you stand in your emotional intelligence quotient, I think is an important factor to help you build better relationships for you and the university.
great. Any parting words, Mike, before we wrap today?
Gosh, just thanks for listening. I really do appreciate it. Professional adulting is an opportunity to really just develop your skill sets. And I hope that maybe I gave you some insights of not just what to do in the workplace, but this could be a model for your students and your graduates in helping them achieve the goals that they have and thinking about their own professional competencies.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks again to Michael for presenting with us during this Professional Development Week. And we will hear from you soon, I hope. Have a great afternoon.